And this one is the next game coming from John D. Clare, and if you're familiar with his work, you might not be surprised that this is a game that also does feature card crafting, and if you're not familiar with that, it's basically where you're going to be combining cards into a sleeve with certain aspects of those cards stacking on top of each other in order to give you a way to upgrade your cards. This is a really great mechanism to combine with deck building because the next time you see that card come up in your deck, it's going to be a little bit different and a little bit more powerful than the last time you had the chance to use it. And this one is also a deck building game, and it does feature a unique way that it does the deck building. I'll get back to that in a second here. But this one is also a cooperative game for 1 to 2 players, and it is also our Discord pick of the week. This is a game where players are going to be playing as different superheroes, fighting different threats, defeating them for new action cards, and then eventually fighting a final boss. Each player starts the game with just 3 action cards, but you do get to draw one for free from the supply each and every round, and each player will be going up against 3 threats for each of these rounds. Most of the action cards do have a cost you have to pay in order to play that card, and you're going to be paying for that cost by spending your action points. Of course, these different cards will allow you to do all sorts of different things, but the main goal you're trying to achieve is to defeat those various threats, because any that are left over at the end of the round are going to be dealing their associated damage to you. Each of these enemies can behave a little bit different from each other, dealing different amounts of damage or having different effects, and even granting different rewards for defeating them. One thing you always get for defeating an enemy card is the card itself, because on the opposite side of that card, you're going to have an action card that you'll be able to add into your supply. Getting back to what makes the deck building of this game so unique is that you don't really have a deck that you're continually building, at least not one that you always have access to, because any of the cards that you use actually go into a discard pile, and once all the threat cards have run out, you're going to be shuffling your discard pile and then using those to form the new threats. This means that you are building up a deck, but in order to get those cards back, you have to defeat the enemy over again. Another neat thing about this is that every time you do reshuffle your discard pile into the next threat deck, you're actually going to be gaining access to the next tier of cards, allowing you to get even more powerful cards into that deck. And there are also some cards that do remain in play when you are able to play them, and these are going to grant you with some special abilities or even additional actions that you'll be able to spend on your turn. In order to win the game, you do have to defeat the final boss, and what's cool about the way that the bosses work in this game is that you're not necessarily doing all the fighting at the end of the game, and each of the bosses is going to be changing the way that the game actually plays and can even modify some of the strengths or weaknesses of the enemies. And each of the bosses can have a very specific way that you'll actually be able to deal damage to them. And if you're able to do all that before you run out of health, then you win the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below.